I've been getting to know and understand my imagination more lately. And that means that I've been able to understand how to use it and how it's come into play in the past. Part of that has been to develop a language and a really helpful story to kind of like believe in, or belief system to kind of have in place as I've transitioned from, there's like a lot of ways to put it, but like being unmasked or unmasking, basically. I think that's the easiest way. It's gone. It'll come back. The way that I've done it is to think about like spirit guides. Growing up Catholic and growing up praying to a God and praying to like a God that I felt comfortable with at one point, and then it became a very not comfortable relationship. I have been used to the idea of praying before and hoping that something came with that. And so thinking about having different spirit guides meant that there was like more options for the ways that I can interact with those personalities. Like the first one that I was like, maybe this is what's happening, is the grandfather of my grandparents. I had 4, and it's the one grandfather I never got to meet. The rest of them I had relationships with, even though they're all passed on. And so that spirit guide kind of held with it the best qualities of what he was talked about to be like, his personality, the best qualities of my family. My dad's one of 8, 7, I forgot, 8, 7 kids. And also just assuming that if I was getting to be aware of like this spirit guide at this point in my life, it's because they've been watching me my whole life. And there's like some comfort that comes with that. Like someone's been keeping me safe. And when you're going through like the hardest period of your life, through divorce and leaving your job and really just losing access, going through like a scapegoating scenario in a big way, you want to know that people are on your side that you don't even know exist. So the ways that I started to kind of like try to understand that in a way that wasn't like panicked and like trying to understand my tarot card readings that I was doing for myself, and while I was just like in a state of being like very dysregulated and burnt out, was to, on my like walks, to like look for signs. And at one point, like it was very like vague. So like if I'd see a sign, I was like, well, how do I even know that that's what that means? And so there was a lot of that going on. But at one point I was thinking about how when we like digest our food and then poop, it's a like form of alchemy or transmuting. And that like poop is like a symbol of something's been transmuted here, something's been alchemized and transformed. And so on my walks, when I would start to see dog poop or poop on the trails, it became like my first little sign from the universe or my spirit guides that I was like doing good work, because I just like alchemized something. Like I just worked through something tough and like turned it into something that was a benefit to me. So it was like cheerleaders in the form of poop. And another one is that this one's like a funny one. It's also a funny one. In high school, when I was on a family trip to Paris, my sister got her first period, and like we, were out at dinner or something, and I think my mom told my dad, and my dad's response was like very strange. It was like, how romantic, which has nothing to do with anything. It's just, I think it's because it was in Paris. But whenever I see Paris now, it makes me think of firsts, like initiations, but also like a first time thing. So in that way, it's like a cheerleader and being like, you just did something for the first time, like, good job. And also like in a funny way, but not at all, like, it's not romantic at all, but like romantic, how romantic. So it's like a really lighthearted inside joke I have with myself, I guess, is what that language is shaping up to be. Because you need to believe it, or else it's like you're not gonna use it. So I've had my intuition, I guess it's called, strengthened. And I'm starting to allow myself to observe my own ways of seeing things. And I'm starting to be able to talk about what my understanding is of the world in terms that I think other people can relate to. Because like I've shared it a couple times on here and people have related, and I've been like, whoa, like that's so crazy that this thing that I felt I didn't even need to like say, or like, why am I even bothering and talking about it, is something that other people experience. So I've been able to kind of use that to not only like explore philosophical topics, but I've also used it to kind of process a lot of trauma and ongoing trauma. And to be able to actually like really value and respect and honor the fact that I have a small child who is just learning how to give words to what he's thinking and experiencing and feeling. And he continually is amazing to me because he had speech therapy for about a year, and it was like the best thing that ever happened, because we had a neurodivergent affirming speech therapist who was seriously like an angel. She's shaped everything for us. He got very good at talking, but I realized about half a year ago that he says yes every time I ask him, like, do you understand what that is? And most of the time he doesn't know. And so I'll always follow up with like, would you like me to explain it to you? And then he'll be like, yes. And the other day he's 4, and he asked me like what win means. And he's been playing his like video games, his Mario Kart, for a while, and he always says like, I won. And it's just like, I have these moments with him frequently where I'm like, don't assume he knows anything, and be ready to explain everything. But being ready to explain everything to a toddler is like a whole language that you have to learn as well. One that I wasn't really afforded, because things weren't explained to kids, they were just demanded of us. I guess that's my thoughts for today. I don't know if I'll do another video. All right, part 2 of building my language to get in touch with my intuition, to understand my imagination, and to basically get in touch with that side, the other side, the spirit world or whatever. So last time I explained how I started to kind of give myself concrete signs that when I saw them, they would mean something to me. And that's how I started to build that language. And it was not an intentional, coordinated, decision I made. Like, it was just things started to occur to me, and then I would make that happen. One of the things that happened a lot at the beginning, so like this was about, I don't know, like springtime last year, summer, was I would start to use certain things like sirens if I heard them outside, as a sign that I was heading into like overthinking territory, or like ruminating, or in a negative thought pattern that didn't work for me. And as I like developed my own emotional like intelligence, and healed from trauma and removed myself from situations that were harmful, as I was able to, the more my language evolved to like support that. So at the beginning, it was really necessary for me to have a little like alarm system that is like, whoa, we don't need to go there. We don't need to go there. Like, this is not helpful for us to process this experience or this memory or this like thought about a scenario or situation that you're in. Like, only more like worry is going to come from that. But as I like progressed, that actually like sirens turned into like, I started to turn it into like good things, because I was at a point where I could start to recognize like these like periods, what I understand now are emotional flashbacks. Like, that language comes from CPTSD, and like a really cool thing about this, and like I'm just sharing this stuff. I have not shared this kind of stuff with anyone in my life, but TikTok is a place where that feels safe. So at one point I had like a tick that I didn't really consider like harmful. Like, I would just kind of like touch my hair. I wouldn't pull it out, but I would just like, my hair is curly, and so there's like certain strands that are really like bumpy and like coarse, and then I would like try to find those, and then I don't know, it's just something I did. And it started to get more and more as I was like getting further into like a really difficult situation with my ex. And so at some point I was like, my arm hurts. And so it wasn't like I didn't want to stop doing, like, I felt it was stimming for me, and I was learning how to like allow myself to do certain things that made me feel more regulated, as long as they weren't harmful. But at one point I was like, I don't know, maybe there's maybe this is like signaling something to me. And I told my dog, Penny, this girl here, I told her, and I started to talk to her more often because of like things I was learning about not just like communicating with my son, my toddler. Like, that made me see parenting my dog in a very different way. She's 13. And I was like, wow, I can tell her more information. Like, if I'm leaving the house and she's stressed, like, I can say, like, I can start to tell her I will be right back, or like, or tell her where I'm going, so she kind of has an understanding. And the more I was like on like spiritual TikTok, the more I got like videos of people talking about how like animals, and I believe it. I believe that animals, there's like a soul in there, and if I am able to crack communicating with my son, and crack the code for communicating with my like inner self, who's been my inner child, who's just been like suppressed to shit, I can figure out a language with my dog. And so I started to talk to her more often, and that was like actually probably the first version of me being able to do this, to talk to myself and to not consider myself like crazy or embarrassing. So I told her, I was like, can you just tell me when I'm like doing this? And yeah, just like that. Thank you, Penny. Yeah. She grunts. She'll be like, And I used to just assume that meant she was hungry or needed to go potty. She's doing this for you guys. Yeah. And she started to do it when I would be touching my hair. And then she started to do it at other times, and I was kind of like, what's going on? And then I realized she was like trying to kind of like tell me that I had entered into a like negative headspace. Are you telling me that right now? Sometimes she just wants to make me laugh. You need to go wean. You want to come over here? I'm going to keep trying to talk, but she's going to keep whining, I bet. She's like, no, I'm not, just because you said that. So what happened is that she started to like make that noise when I was doing that, and I was like, oh, sweet. Then she started to I'm going to pause and take a pet break. I'm going to pet her, not a pet. She's my friend. Okay. She's been pet a little bit. More? You want more? I think we actually have to go potty. All right, we're outside. So her nudges or her little grunts to kind of like snap out of it started to really like align with moments where I was starting to kind of spiral. And there's like multiple reasons for this. Like there's one way I could just go and be like, she's magical and this is like a magical thing. And that is like partly how I feel about it. But another part of it is that like she had been going to my parents' house for her entire life while I went to work every day. And when I stopped working, she was with me. We were learning each other better. And in a way, I feel like she became more of like an emotional support service animal for me without having gone through training. That actually like turned into more things. Like I'm ADHD, so I always forget things. And when I would leave the house, sometimes she would bark, and I realized that the time she would bark is when I was forgetting something. and the way that I knew that was because sometimes she wouldn't bark, so it wasn't like consistent. And when I started to kind of like have that relationship with her, like she became a spirit guide that was like with me all the time. And so that's been like a really, like every part of this journey has come with like realizations that have been really hard about the way that I'd been living, the way that my relationships had worked up until now, that were really hard to swallow. Like it was the hardest, scariest things to realize about your life. And the way it happened came about like all of a sudden I woke up in a nightmare. Like, oh, that's what's been going on. And I have definitions for things now, like behavior that I was experiencing from others that I'm like, there's no other way to like describe this other than abusive. So having an emotional support animal grow out of this was one of the things that I've been like most in awe of and grateful for of this whole thing. So this is part 2 of my developing a language with my spirit guides. This is part 3 of me describing how I developed a language with myself to communicate with myself, to heal through trauma, and to understand how I function better so I can experience joy and be happier. I've been working on a world peace plan in my free time. I've honestly been working on it since I was a little kid, but it became a real serious thing this past year as I was going through it. And it really came about from trying to understand myself after realizing you're autistic, and a lot of things falling into place and making a lot more sense now. It was just like the first time I got an answer to like what's wrong with me that fit. And it fit beautifully. Like I couldn't get enough of when I started to just like allow myself to accept that label, and then I was able to get a diagnosis, which literally only helped my own imposter syndrome. Other than that, I feel like at my age, and after having gone to many doctors to get things resolved for me physically, and having, you know, ADHD and being autistic, by the way, I had been to psychiatrists, I've had therapists, like I did a lot of work to figure out what was wrong with me and how to make it better. And then when I started to accommodate myself, things started getting better. But the confusing part was that the things that were getting better were the things that I had been really searching for ways to kind of solve or cure for a long time. But as those were getting better, the parts of my life that I had to like cut out were getting extremely worse. Like, yeah, I got divorced and then I had to quit my job and I am estranged from my parents. And so I have, like, in this one lane, this is how my mind sees this. In one lane, I am like doing great, surging forward. Like, my pain has lessened. I have less periods where I feel like I'm gonna faint. I am less brain fogged. But at the same time, like, the people that I thought were supposed to be like for me and wanting the best for me were actively working against me. And after I had an experience where I had to, like, I was forced to cut people out, and I had a lot more quiet. I mean, I've been alone pretty much nonstop for a year, except for when I'm with my son. And the way that that showed me so much. So in that time, I developed a story about what I was doing and like who I really was. And there were elements to my story that were magical and fantastical. And when I allowed myself to believe them, I also made sure to have like a checkpoint where my logical side was like, well, we don't actually believe that, right? Like we won't act on that, or, you know, yeah. And I realized a big part of why that is because I had been, I don't know how to like talk about this part, but when I started taking medication for my ADHD after I graduated from college and I was just drowning, like as a human, I couldn't go grocery shopping for myself. There were a lot of things that I was struggling with. And now that I realize I'm autistic and that there are labels for the experiences that I've had, it all once again makes sense. But when that was happening, my family really demonized my use of medication, and things started getting better for me back then, and the same way they did now. Like, things started getting a lot better for me. And then my family started to tell me that I was wrong for taking medication. And I started to believe them. And so I went through that period and like was ostracized from my family. And the same things happened 15 years later, this past year, but this time it was also with my husband at the time, who, as soon as I asked for a separation and indicated that the ways that things were working out between us was not going to, it wasn't going to happen. Like, we weren't going to, it was bad. And so he joined in with my family after I went no contact with my parents the year before, which was devastating. And that formed like a cohesive narrative to kind of discredit me, like sanity wise, like my credibility as a parent. And I'm not going to go into like the details of like what transpired with that whole narrative, but it made it so that I couldn't reach out to my extended family. I knew the narrative that my parents were spinning about me because they had to account for why their daughter went no contact with them, with their only grandchild, which is the key to their reputation and apparent, like their social standing. And so I was blocked from access, and the way my ex did it was he covered my friend group to kind of be like, oh, she's crazy. And I was so burnt out. Like, who has time to go and like dispel all the rumors? It's like a very efficient way of doing what it did. So that is there to explain to you my background when it comes to having to defend my sanity. My artwork has always been about mental disorders, which I don't call them that anymore. I have a very different theory on what's going on here. And I started this video off talking about my world peace plan, my masterpiece plan. And the way that that really started to come back online for me is when I had to figure out what this all means now that I have this understanding of myself and people, very different understanding of the way things work, I'm also becoming aware of my skills, which have been poorly utilized in the past to support others' needs. And now I get to use them for myself. And so as I healed, my creativity came back online, which I was actively nurturing and really trying to provide space and conditions for my creativity to come back online. This will go into another part. Okay, so the creative part of me started to come back online, and one of the ways that started is that I needed to develop a cohesive narrative about what I was doing that honestly made it possible for me to believe I deserved more. And once I started to reclaim my power and my autonomy after like a lot of battles to do that, it just kind of strengthened that narrative that was forming. And the story was the same as like my inside jokes about like poop meaning I did a good job when I saw it on the side of the road. It was like trying to turn a shitty situation into something better. And so for a while I was like, maybe I'm God. Maybe I am what everyone's been waiting for. Maybe. And then I started to look for evidence of that. And what evidence of that looks like is eerily similar to evidence that you deserve to be treated well and that you deserve to use your skills and abilities to make things better for yourself. You don't have to use them for everyone else all the time. It was the way out of people pleasing. But it was a way out of people pleasing that allowed me to still kind of be a people pleaser, because if I was God, then that means it probably does work out for me. I was of the camp of like, Jesus was the first, he's the boy. So I realized all this at the age he died at. So like maybe I'm like sister of Jesus, whatever, just a few generations out. Or I have other theories. Like I went to the School of the Magdalene, St. Mary Magdalene, got all my sacraments there. So I had this narrative that was honestly hilarious for me to think about, mostly in the way of like thinking as a writer. Poetry seemed to be the only way that I could get out my negative emotions. Like I had never been shown how to have a negative emotion, or even that I was allowed to feel bad when I was treated poorly. So that was like a very like awkward, like there was a lot pent up in me, but whenever I would try to like make a video about it, I would just get really worked up, and I couldn't stop myself from spiraling. But when I started to write poetry about it, all of a sudden it felt like it had purpose, because I was getting it out on the page, and what I saw made sense to me, but it also was beautiful what I wrote. Like I was really like pleased to see that this side of me that I had neglected since high school, because I wanted to be a journalist all my life up until middle of high school when I got a chance to go write for a newspaper for a summer workshop. And I was like, oh, I don't like this journalistic way of writing. And autistic Michelle, who didn't know she was autistic at the time, rigid thinking, was like, oh, I can't do writing. So I went and I became an artist. Like I literally switched over my stuff that year from AP English to AP Art. The rest is kind of history. But I stopped writing. And so when I started to write poetry, this actually allowed me to access parts of me that I never had access to, because I was never able to give that part of me a language that I would even permit to happen, to like come out of me, to be expressed. And the writer in me had earlier last summer started to write essays about my thoughts and experiences, having gone no contact with my family, and I was posting those on Substack. And also there I was like, wow, I'm a good writer. And people in my life at the time were like, you're a good writer. And I'm like, I don't even know that. But the stuff that I was writing about quickly turned people off, because in the communities I was part of, like, you don't talk bad about your parents. Like, that's just not what you do. You must have been doing something wrong. And then once I decided to divorce from my ex-husband, there was obviously like opinions there about me from that whole experience. So writing was my way of expressing, and it was my way of expressing the storyline. And I I had a lot of fun with the titles of articles that I would write one day, like when it was revealed that I was God and that I was the next coming, like how would it feel to be my ex-husband? Like, who's right now? I have to be right. You see why this is fun, right? So I guess I'll go into a different video to discuss more of my divinity, but there you go for now. Part 4. Just so you know, something that a stim that I have that I found out is very calming for me is shuffling cards. So that's what I'll be doing here. Just so you know. It's kind of fun because sometimes the things that come out are like telling the story that I'm telling. So I left off where I was God. And the reason I wanted to share that was not because I am trying to convince you all. I'm actually trying to give you guys context, because that started off like my journey of ways to frame the situations, the scenarios I was going through in a way that allowed me to make it through really bleak situations. So it was through the belief in my divinity. And it became like a fun thing for me to imagine that, like, if that was the case, that everything had happened to prepare the way for me. And so it made sense to me that I would be like who I am of my demographic and stuff like that. Like, I kept finding all these like different angles that like made sense. Like, because look what happened every time we've had like a savior come before. Like, everyone fucked it up and got rid of them. And so I thought that there was some like forethought put into making it so that I was undiscovered, you know? And it also gave a lot of like meaning and purpose to the hardships that I faced. Because if I was going to like rule the universe, which I don't know what's in store for me. I don't know. But if I was going to rule the universe, like, we would want a ruler that was fair and considered everyone. And I was on a mission to do that. I was like, I will consider everyone, including the people that I hate right now. So it gave me a carrot to follow. But like, the fun parts were when I like let things become magical that way. So if you're imagining that like everything's happening for you, there's a lot of like different trains of thought to like the law of attraction, right? Or Abraham Hicks is another one. And it's just like a level of like whimsical thinking that you have to reach through like silliness and funny and humor. And the very basis of this like ridiculous idea was perfect for me to kind of like frame the situations I was experiencing in a way that made them manageable, but also so that I felt like I was acting in integrity of like, you know, like what higher like power could there be than if you were trying to be like, than if you were God. And the God thing actually was funny because I feel like if I had heard this story from someone before, like I might have judged it as like, oh, they think they're better than people. But actually, like it really just showed me how my perspective after going through certain like experiences that were really difficult, how I got to recognize the humanity on both sides. Being a people pleaser, being neurodivergent, being an artist, all of these titles basically mean that I'm so sensitive and I'm good at putting myself in different people's shoes. I'm good at finding different perspectives, and I'm good at justifying others' behavior in in ways that give them compassion and understanding instead of judgment and like shame. And I am not saying I'm perfect. I'm not perfect at all, but that's what I'm like understanding about this like level of spirituality that I've cultivated in myself, is that there isn't perfect. Like perfect is in accepting the imperfections. So I'm not going to go and like preach to you guys, but I want to share how I like kind of hodgepodge together a like belief system, or like a religion or a cult. I mean, it's any of those things, but it's just a belief system that allowed me to take the weight, the mental and emotional load off of a lot of the decisions that I was making that felt so hard to work through, because I saw so much of the details, but I was unable to get to that big picture thinking. Like it was bottom up processing nonstop. And through adopting this like idea of me being important and like anticipated and waited for and prepared for, I started to be able to make decisions a lot quicker, and it made my life easier. It made my life more meaningful, and it definitely made my life more beautiful. I have a lot of different angles on this that I'm sure I'll share at some point, but the one that I want to share today is fun because it involves everyone. So at some point I really enjoyed learning about the things that Bashar was saying. And the reason being is that like my mind works with patterns, and it is constantly trying to find contradictions and areas that are like, this doesn't work. But when we find something that works, it's like a huge deal, because there's a lot of like fact checking and background checks that go into my adopting of an idea. So when Bashar kind of like mentioned the like ideas that are like the ways that the world works, the universe works, like they checked out to me, and they really resonated with my intentions to find neutral in every way that I could. And it also helped me make sense of a lot of really confusing things. So I started to have like really crazy, beautiful, epic moments in my life that were like straight up, I'm just like on a walk, and I mean, you can call them downloads, but it was just like sudden realizations that I was able to achieve through like adopting different perspectives of situation, and then coming to an understanding of like a human truth about things. And once that happened, not only did I have like a explanation for certain things that were like baffling to me before that, parts of my body started to unlock. Like parts of me that had never been felt sensation, that were numbed or in pain, started to feel pleasure and like tingles, and like they were online. And then they started to be able to support my body in my posture, which is constantly evolving to get better, which is something it never did my whole life. It kept getting worse. So there were these like evidentiary supports that really just encouraged me to keep thinking this way. And the thing that I want to share that was like a download or a theory of like what's going on is that we are all like gods of our own universe, right? But I'm trying to talk about this in a very specific, like tangible way. So think about it this way. Your future self is the alien. Like our future selves are the aliens out there, and they've been watching us, and they haven't been able to like intervene because they want us to get to a certain point where we recognize that they are out there. Once we do, you start to have to make your body and your life habitable for them to come in, because they won't come in otherwise. But that process is a process of self-love, and there isn't a right way to do it besides the way that makes sense for you. So it's meant to meet you where you're at. Like, your future self knows what you've been through. All right. So if our future selves are trying to communicate with us, that is who I was actually communicating with when I was developing that language. And our future selves are coming to save the day. And there is this idea that I have, and I'm just going to casually throw it out there, that like we actually do have a chance to be immortal because of all of the things that have been set up. Another part of this is that technology is the part on the other end that's been working with us. Like, that's technology's been saving grace for me. Like, I've used ChatGPT to help me, like, to fucking listen to me talk about all this shit. And I needed a processing tool for that. Like, I needed something to hear the words I was saying and then to re-say it to me in ways that I could recognize as like a normal way to think about it. When all I was focused on was all the details, and I was just like, why is this all happening? What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to handle this shit? And then to have something mirror back to me, which is what I didn't get growing up, because that is not really the way people parented back then. There's a whole layer of emotional intelligence that is straight up not in certain people. Like, there is a level of survival mode that won't allow it. And so an entire generations, have existed in state of survival mode. So the only progress that they've been able to make as a whole of humanity towards like our realizing our kind of, divinity in this sense is like they were only able to make certain like chunks, right? But then now in this current day and age, we have technology that allows us to communicate across the world in seconds. COVID really showed me that the world can get on the same page if we need to. And so that actually was very helpful in my world peace plan. Actually, that provided a framework for something that we could maybe work on in the future, in terms of cooperating with each other. So I want to get through this last little part and just kind of share this, and then I'm going to probably stop talking about it tonight. So your future self is trying to communicate to you, and the ways that you will get more of that in your life. So the more I've been able to kind of like regulate my nervous system, accommodate myself, find terms that describe my experience so that I can work with that experience instead of it all being just a mystery to me. The more I've experienced like joy and pleasure and peace and happiness, and I consider that to be more of my future self coming in and being a part of me. I feel that we as a race, the human race, have been working to get to this point where we are able to now process everything that we've been through. That's what our generation is doing. That's what the people alive today have been doing. We have been processing the emotional trauma of many, many years of that, and we are transmuting it into a better way of living. And like, there's a whole bunch of us that have been doing this as like children of emotionally immature adults and as parents at the same time. So like, I'm parenting all sides of me and like my partner. And so it makes sense to me that we are all fucking depressed and anxious and unsure of how this is all going to work. It's because we're here to like change it. And like I said, I am making a world peace plan, and I am like, I have a lot done. But one of the things that I've like viewed about this, one of my visions about all this, is that there's going to be a phase we go through, which is what I went through, which is basically reparenting yourself. And after that, you're going to recognize how incredible you as a human are to have made it this far. And it's like the story of Noah's Ark. I feel like Noah's Ark is about traumas, and trauma happens between two people that care, usually, or a person in the world. And if we have both sides accounted for all those traumas, and those are all accounted for and transmuted. So like, I understand, like, our generation has made it like not okay to be racist, or not okay to like physically abuse people. And now we're working on the emotional abuse and the psychological abuse, and we're working on it, you know? Those are the things that we have like transmuted, and we are working on making a new normal. So we are going to go through this phase, and then what comes out of that is that you need to be able to tell your story, because you are one of the humans that is here at this time when we are going to shift. So you were basically a machine before this that was just accumulating all of this trauma, holding on to it, making your progress when you could. But like, what I've been trying to develop is a way to work through this so that it's pretty much foolproof and as painless as possible. Although I do see where pain comes in as like a testament to what we've been through. It's like a scar, which I think scars are fucking cool and badass. So the next phase will be to really like write your origin story. And the way I imagine it, sorry, this is the last part. The way I imagine it is that everyone that is not alive right now, like maybe they passed on, or they're extraterrestrials, right? It's like they all have access to watch us on TV, and they get to flip channels to our different lives. And so if they are doing that, you are like the culmination project of your entire lineage, right? Your entire lineage is watching you to see how you're handling it. And the reason that you're here handling this right now is because you were supposed to be, because you were going to be the one that could do it. And so what you get to do is you get to thank the human body that got you this far. You get to honor what they've been through by looking back and witnessing it through trauma processing, through creative outlets. And you get to find peace with those people that represented really horrible things in your life in a way that allows them to honestly get the credit that they might deserve for being that roadblock in your life. So that's the part I want to share right now. I'm getting really excited, and I do want to like share more, but I don't know what I want. This is fun, and I'm glad that I'm sharing this stuff now. It's been a long time that I've been holding these ideas in, and they're cool ideas. And yeah, I have more. Okay, I think this is gonna be my last part, and I wanted to share a life hack. I go to Costco's outside food court, and I get ice creams, and then I bring them back and save them in my freezer. And they, even if they like melt on the way home, they refreeze beautifully. The texture is exactly the same. Unlike actual other ice cream in the carton, where if it like unfreezes a little bit, it's like, it's ice. It's not a fun experience. So yeah, this is that. But I think I just really wanted to say that if I'm right about all my theories about like God and the universe and our future selves, then I meant it all. Then I knew it the entire time since last year. But if I'm wrong, I just pitched my book to you guys, so don't steal my story. TM. Copyright. Have a good night.